The door creaked open, and I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. My stepdad, Greg, stood in the doorway, his broad silhouette blocking the hallway light, his eyes narrowing at the sketchbook in my hands. I'd been drawing him, Elliot, the boy who turned my world upside down, and now my secret was exposed. I was 19, a lanky kid with a mop of brown hair and a tendency to overthink everything. My name's Caleb, and I'd spent most of my life in Willow Creek, a sleepy Ohio suburb where everyone knew everyone's business. My mom married Greg 3 years ago, and while he wasn't a bad guy, he was old school. Think flannel shirts, football Sundays, and a firm handshake that could crush bones. I'd always kept my head down, hiding who I was because I knew he wouldn't get it. Nobody in Willow Creek would. That night, though, everything unraveled. The sketchbook in my hands was filled with drawings of Elliot Martinez, the new kid who'd moved in across the street. 20, with dark eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. Elliot was everything I wasn't. Bold, unapologetic, and openly queer. He'd shown up in our cul-de-sac with a skateboard under his arm and a grin that made my stomach flip. We'd been friends for months, but lately, it was more than that. Stolen glances, late-night texts, and moments that felt like they could burn the world down. I'd poured all of it into my sketches, and now Greg was staring at them. "Caleb," Greg said, his voice low, like he was trying to piece together a puzzle. "What's this?" He stepped closer, and I slammed the sketchbook shut, my face burning. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. All I could think was that this was the moment my life would implode. But let's rewind. This story doesn't start with Greg catching me. It starts with Elliot, the summer heat, and a moment that changed everything. It was July, and Willow Creek was suffocating under a haze of humidity. I was sitting on my porch, pretending to read, when Elliot skated by, his earbuds blasting something loud and electric. He stopped, kicked his board up, and flashed that grin. "Yo, Caleb, you ever gonna leave that porch or what?" he teased, his voice warm like the sun. I laughed, nervous because Elliot had this way of making me feel seen. Maybe if there's something worth leaving for. I shot back, surprising myself. He raised an eyebrow, and before I knew it, we were talking, really talking, about music, about dreams, about how Willow Creek felt like a cage. He told me about growing up in Chicago, about coming out to his family at 16, about the freedom he felt just being himself. I envied that. I'd known I was gay since I was 14, but I'd never said it out loud. Not to my mom, not to Greg, not even to myself. That summer, Elliot and I became inseparable. We'd sneak out at night, sit by the creek, and talk until the stars faded. He'd tell me about the protests he'd been to, the art he wanted to create, the life he imagined far from here. I'd listen, sketching him in my mind, too scared to admit what I felt. But every time our shoulders brushed or his hand lingered too long when passing me a soda, I felt it. A spark, a pull, something undeniable. One night, we were sprawled on the grass behind his house, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle. "You ever think about just leaving?" he asked, his voice soft. "Like, running away and starting over somewhere nobody knows you?" "All the time," I admitted, staring at the sky. "But I'm not brave like you." He turned to me, his eyes catching the moonlight. "You're braver than you think, Caleb. You just don't know it yet." His hand found mine, and for a moment the world stopped. My heart raced, but I didn't pull away. Couldn't. That was the night I realized I was falling for him, and it terrified me. Back to that night with Greg. He didn't yell, which was worse. He just stood there, holding my sketchbook, flipping through pages of Elliot's face. His sharp cheekbones, his half-smile, the way his hair fell over one eye. "This is the Martinez kid, right?" Greg asked, his tone unreadable. "Yeah," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I braced for the lecture, the disappointment, the "we don't do that in this house" speech. But Greg just handed the sketchbook back and said, "We need to talk. Tomorrow." Then he walked out, leaving me to drown in my own panic. I didn't sleep that night. All I could think about was Elliot, how he'd react if he knew, how I'd face him, how I'd survive if Greg told my mom. Willow Creek wasn't a place where people like me could just be. I'd seen the looks at school, heard the whispers about the one-out kid who'd graduated 2 years ago and left town after too many incidents. I didn't want that to be me, but I also didn't want to lose Elliot. The next morning, I avoided Greg, slipping out before breakfast to meet Elliot at the creek. He was already there, tossing pebbles into the water, his skateboard propped against a tree. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said, squinting at me. "Greg saw my sketches," I blurted. "Of you." Elliot's eyes widened, but then he grinned. "So what? You're an artist. He can't handle a few drawings?" "It's not just drawings," I said, my voice shaking. "He knows Elliot, or he will soon, and I don't know what to do." Elliot stepped closer, his hand grazing my arm. "You don't have to do anything alone, okay? We'll figure it out. Together." That word, together, felt like a lifeline. But as I looked at him, all I could think was that together might not be enough to survive what was coming. The creek glittered under the morning sun, but my stomach churned with dread. Elliot's words echoed in my head, together, but the weight of Greg's looming talk pressed down like a storm cloud. I wanted to believe we could face this, but Willow Creek had a way of crushing anything that didn't fit its mold. Elliot sat cross-legged on the grass, his dark hair catching the light as he tossed another pebble into the water. "So, what's the worst that could happen?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Greg flips out, maybe, but he's not going to kick you out, right?" I shrugged, picking at the frayed hem of my jeans. "You don't know him. He's traditional. Thinks guys like us are just confused." I hated how small my voice sounded, how much I still cared what Greg thought. He wasn't my dad. My real dad left when I was 5, but he'd been around long enough to matter. Elliot leaned back, propping himself on his elbows. "Okay, so he's a dinosaur. Doesn't mean he gets to dictate who you are. You're Caleb. You're smart, you're talented, and..." He paused, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You're kinda cute when you're freaking out." I shoved him lightly, my face burning. "Shut up." But his words sparked something warm in my chest, a flicker of courage I hadn't felt before. I wanted to be the person he saw, not the scared kid hiding in his room. That afternoon, I couldn't avoid Greg any longer. He was in the garage, tinkering with his old Mustang, the radio blaring classic rock. I hovered in the doorway, my palms sweaty. "You wanted to talk?" I said, my voice barely audible over the music. He turned, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, sit." He gestured to a stool by the workbench. I sat, feeling like I was awaiting a verdict. Greg leaned against the car, crossing his arms. "Those drawings, they're good. Really good. But they're all of that Martinez kid. You want to tell me what's going on?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. This was it, the moment I dreaded for years. I like him," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Not just as a friend. I'm gay, Greg." The silence that followed was deafening. Greg's jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he might explode. But then he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. I don't get it, Caleb. I won't lie. But you're my kid, and I'm not here to make your life harder." I blinked, stunned. "You're not mad." "I'm not thrilled," he admitted, his voice gruff. "But I'm not an idiot. I've seen how you light up around that boy. Just be careful, all right?" This town's not exactly progressive. I nodded, my head spinning. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was more than I'd expected. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. That night, I told Elliot everything. We were in his basement, surrounded by posters of punk bands and half-finished canvases. He listened, his knee brushing mine, and when I finished, he grabbed my hand. "See? Told you we'd figure it out." "It's not figured out," I said, but I couldn't help smiling. "Greg's still processing. And Mom doesn't even know yet." "Then we'll deal with that too," Elliot said, his voice steady. "You're not alone in this, Caleb. I'm right here." The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and cautious hope. Elliot and I grew closer, our friendship blurring into something deeper. We'd sneak off to the old drive-in theater, long abandoned, and sit in the bed of Greg's truck, sharing stories and dreams under the stars. One night, he kissed me, soft, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. It was my first kiss, and it felt like the world had finally clicked into place. But Willow Creek wasn't done with us. Rumors started spreading. Whispers at school, sideways glances from neighbors. Someone saw us holding hands at the creek, and by the next day, it was all over town. Kids at school started calling me names, leaving notes in my locker. "Freak," one read. "Leave," said another. I tried to ignore it, but each word cut deeper. Elliot, of course, didn't care. "Let them talk," he said one day, tossing a rock into the creek with a defiant flick of his wrist. "They're just jealous they're stuck in this boring-ass town living boring-ass lives." I wanted to be that brave, but I wasn't. The breaking point came when I got home one evening and found my mom crying in the kitchen. Greg was there, his hand on her shoulder, and they both looked up when I walked in. "Caleb," Mom said, her voice trembling. "Is it true? What people are saying?" My heart sank. I'd wanted to tell her myself on my terms, but Willow Creek had stolen that from me. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's true. I'm gay." She didn't yell, didn't turn away. She just stood and hugged me, her tears soaking into my shirt. "I love you," she whispered. I need time." Greg stayed silent, but his nod told me he had my back. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Still, the town's judgment loomed larger every day, and I knew this was only the beginning. The air in Willow Creek grew heavier as summer faded into fall. The whispers turned into outright hostility, and I felt like I was walking through a minefield every time I left the house. Elliot, though, was a constant, a lighthouse in the storm. School was the worst. My senior year was supposed to be about college applications and coasting through, but instead, I was dodging glares and cruel comments in the hallways. One day, someone spray-painted "fag" on my locker in bright red letters. I stood there, staring at it, my chest tight, until Elliot found me. Without a word, he grabbed a rag from the janitor's closet and started scrubbing. "They're just cowards," he muttered, his jaw set. "Don't let them win." But they were winning. I could feel it in the way my hands shook when I walked home, the way I started avoiding the creek because it didn't feel safe anymore. Elliot noticed, of course. "You're pulling away," he said one evening as we sat in his backyard, the fire pit casting flickering shadows. "Talk to me, Caleb." "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if this gets worse? What if they hurt you?" He reached for my hand, his grip firm. "Then we fight back. Not with fists but by living. By being us unapologetically." His words stuck with me, but the fear didn't go away. Things escalated when a group of guys from school cornered me behind the gym after class. They didn't touch me, but their words were sharp enough to leave bruises. "You and your boyfriend better watch it," one of them sneered. "This town doesn't want your kind." I ran home, my heart pounding, and locked myself in my room, sketching Elliot's face just to feel grounded. That night, Greg knocked on my door. "Heard what happened?" he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "You okay?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "I don't know how to do this, Greg. I don't know how to be me." He was quiet for a long time, then said, "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just keep going. And if those punks try anything again, they'll answer to me." It wasn't a warm speech, but coming from Greg, it meant everything. The next day, Elliot had a plan. "We're not hiding," he declared, dragging me to the school's art room after hours. He'd gotten permission from Ms. Harper, the art teacher, to use the space for a project. We spent hours painting a mural, a vibrant explosion of color, with two silhouetted figures holding hands against a starry sky. "This is us," Elliot said, stepping back to admire it. "This is what they can't take away." The mural caused a stir. Some kids loved it. Others called it disgusting. The principal threatened to paint over it, but Ms. Harper fought for it, saying it was about freedom of expression. For the first time, I felt like we had allies. But the victory was short-lived. That weekend, someone vandalized the mural, slashing through the figures with black paint. Seeing it felt like a punch to the gut. Elliot was furious, but I was broken. "Maybe they're right," I told him, my voice hollow as we stared at the ruined mural. "Maybe we don't belong here." "Don't say that," he snapped, grabbing my shoulders. "This is our home, too. We make it ours by staying." But staying was getting harder. My mom started getting calls from neighbors, concerned about me. Greg overheard one and slammed the phone down, muttering about small-minded idiots. He didn't say much to me, but he started driving me to school, his way of protecting me without making a fuss. One night, Elliot and I snuck out to the drive-in again, needing an escape. We lay in the truck bed, staring at the stars, and he told me about his dream to move to New York, to study art and live openly. "Come with me," he said suddenly, turning to face me. "After you graduate, we'll get out of here, start over." My heart leapt, but doubt crept in. What if I'm not ready? What if I'm not enough? He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "You're enough, Caleb. You've always been enough." We kissed, and for a moment the world was just us. But as we drove back, headlights flashed behind us. A truck followed too close, its horn blaring. I recognized the driver, one of the guys from school. They tailgated us all the way to Elliott Street, shouting slurs out the window. When we pulled over, they sped off, laughing. Elliot was shaking with rage, but I was terrified. This wasn't just rumors anymore. This was real. The truck's taillights faded into the night, but the fear lingered, a cold weight in my chest. Elliot and I sat in his driveway, silent, the hum of crickets filling the space between us. "We can't let them scare us," he said finally, his voice tight. But I was scared. Scared of what they'd do next, scared of losing him, scared of what it meant to keep fighting. The next morning, I told Greg about the truck. His face darkened, and he grabbed his keys. "Nobody threatens my kid," he growled, heading for the door. I begged him to stay calm, but he was already calling the school, demanding they do something about the harassment. To my surprise, they suspended the guys involved, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like pouring gas on a fire. Elliot and I tried to keep things normal. We'd meet at the creek, paint in the art room, steal kisses when no one was looking. But the town's hostility was relentless. Notes kept appearing in my locker. My bike tires were slashed. And once, someone threw a rock through Elliot's bedroom window with a slur scrawled on it. His mom, a fierce woman who'd raised him alone, reported it to the police, but they brushed it off as kids being kids. One evening, I found Greg in the garage, staring at his Mustang like it held all the answers. "I don't know how to fix this for you," he admitted, his voice rough. "I want to, Caleb, but I don't know how." I didn't know what to say. Greg wasn't perfect. He still flinched sometimes when I mentioned Elliot, but he was trying. That meant more than I could put into words. Things came to a head at the town's fall festival. Elliot and I went together, determined to have one normal night. The fairgrounds were alive with lights, music, and the smell of cotton candy. For a while, it felt like we could breathe. We shared a Ferris wheel ride, our hands clasped tight, the world below us sparkling. "This is what I want," Elliot whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "You, me, moments like this." But as we stepped off the ride, I saw them. The same guys from school, watching us from across the crowd. My stomach dropped. Elliot squeezed my hand, his jaw set. "Ignore them," he said, but I could hear the strain in his voice. We didn't see it coming. Later that night, as we walked to Greg's truck in the parking lot, they ambushed us. There were 4 of them, their faces twisted with hate. "You don't belong here," one spat, shoving Elliot hard. I lunged forward, yelling at them to back off, but they were on us before we could run. It was chaos, fists flying, shouts echoing. I took a punch to the jaw, pain exploding in my head. Elliot fought back, landing a hit before someone tackled him to the ground. I screamed his name, scrambling to help, but a kick to my ribs sent me sprawling. Then, headlights flooded the lot, and Greg's voice boomed, "Get the hell away from them!" He was there, pulling the guys off us, his face a mask of fury. The attackers scattered, and Greg knelt beside me, his hands steady as he checked my bruises. "You okay?" he asked, his voice shaking. I nodded, though my whole body hurt. Elliot was worse. His lip was bleeding, his eye swelling shut, but he managed a weak grin. "Told you we'd fight back." Greg drove us home, silent but gripping the wheel like he might break it. At the house, Mom patched us up, her hands trembling as she cleaned Elliot's cuts. "This town," she muttered, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Caleb." That night, I lay awake, replaying the fight. Elliot was asleep on the couch downstairs, too bruised to go home. I wanted to protect him, to protect us, but I didn't know how. The next morning, Greg called a family meeting. "We're leaving Willow Creek," he said, his tone final. "I got a job offer in Columbus. It's a fresh start, for all of us." I stared at him, stunned. Columbus was only an hour away, but it felt like another world. A bigger city, more diverse, a place where Elliot and I might actually belong. Mom nodded, her eyes soft. "It's time," she said. "You deserve better." Elliot was quiet when I told him, but his smile said everything. "A fresh start," he repeated, squeezing my hand. "Together. Together," I promised, my heart full. Moving to Columbus was like stepping into a new life. The city buzzed with energy. Street festivals, coffee shops, people who didn't stare when Elliot and I held hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was freedom. Our new apartment was small, but it was ours, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe. Elliot and I enrolled in community college, him in art, me in graphic design. We'd spend evenings in our tiny dorm, sketching and laughing, building a future together. Greg and Mom settled into a new routine, too. Greg took me aside one day, his voice gruff but warm. "I'm proud of you, Caleb. You're stronger than I ever was." I didn't know how to respond, so I just hugged him. It was awkward, but it was real. He'd gone from the guy who caught me sketching to the man who'd fought for me, who'd uprooted his life to give us a chance. Mom, too, had grown. She joined a support group for parents of LGBTQ kids, determined to understand me better. But the scars from Willow Creek lingered. Some nights, I'd wake up gasping, dreaming of that parking lot, of fists and hate. Elliot would hold me, whispering that we were safe now, that we'd made it. And we had. We were building something new, something ours. One evening, we went to a local art gallery where Elliot's work was being shown. His painting, a vibrant reimagining of our mural, two figures holding hands under a starry sky, hung proudly on the wall. People milled around, praising his talent, and I watched him shine, my heart swelling with pride. As we walked home, hand in hand, he stopped under a streetlight. "You know," he said, his eyes soft, "that night your stepdad walked into your room, it changed everything. But it brought us here, to this." I nodded, tears prickling my eyes. "Yeah, it did." We kissed, the city humming around us, and I knew we'd be okay. Willow Creek had tried to break us, but it only made us stronger. Love, I realized, wasn't just the spark between us. It was the courage to keep going, the family who stood by us, the future we were building together. And as we stood there, I thought about that sketchbook, now tucked away in a drawer. It had started with a secret, a fear, a moment that could have destroyed me. But it led to this, to us, to a life where I could finally be myself. That night had changed everything, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.